Welcome everyone, my name is Tim Phillips. I'm from Platforms Intelligence. We're a regulatory tracking service for the platform economy, focused on food delivery but other sort of physical delivery items as well. I'm really pleased to be here with Sacha Michaud, who is the co-founder of Glovo, and he's also in charge of public affairs, which is the area we're really focused on. Sacha, can you explain a little bit about your business for people who don't know?
Glovo is a platform, an on-demand platform. Our vision is to give everyone easy access to anything in your city. In essence, what we do is we'll pretty much deliver anything in your city in under 30 minutes, from obviously restaurant food, groceries, any retail stores, or we'll actually go to even a store that you choose that's not a partner of ours, and we'll go and buy the product for you and deliver it. Today we're in 24 countries, over 1,000 cities, and still growing quite fast.
Great. So look, our focus obviously today is on regulatory issues that are facing this sector. It's growing very fast. It's clearly you and your competitors are kind of creating a lot of media interest. Partly, I think, because this idea that there might be some dystopian future where a computer controls lots of people and so on. I'd like to get into some of the regulatory issues about the platform economy, and particularly maybe we start with food delivery, so restaurant delivery. And I know you're kind of almost unique in having started your business with a much wider range of kind of products. But if we can just start with the sort of food delivery side of things, what are the biggest issues from your perspective in terms of operating in the countries that you operate in from a regulatory perspective? What are the things that really kind of affect you and worry you, if you like?
When we started Glovo, we thought our couriers would work for the platform and probably combine it with another job or another activity, and it would be just an addition on top of their main revenue stream. And that happens. There are a lot of our couriers who actually really need that flexibility, and it's just an additional income on top of other things they're doing, or they combine it with studies, and that fits really well. But there's a large percentage, in fact the majority, who really depend on that income, both as their main source and sometimes their only source. And that's something that I think needs to be treated very differently. And the responsibility of platforms, when somebody's depending on the income and we're their life stream, and should be treated differently, no? And we should be giving them a lot more guarantees, in my opinion. Guarantees on income, guarantees on the amount of hours they want. The two main pain points for our couriers are earnings per hour and how many hours we can give them. So we have a certain responsibility, and then to round that with social rights, no? Equivalent to maybe having a labour contract. I'm in favour of flexibility. I don't think they necessarily have to have a labour contract. They can perfectly well be freelance, but they should have additional protections, insurance, etc. And I think that's something that when most of us set up these companies, we didn't see that, but we've been, as we've been quite outspoken from Glovo in looking for those, especially being, a European founded company. Yeah. We believe in that. And we work with couriers in 3 different ways. We're in 4 continents. We're, as I mentioned before, we're in 24 countries. And we work with couriers mainly as a freelance. We also use third-party companies. In some of the countries, they have third-party companies which offer the courier service. And we also have employees now delivering. And I think what we should be looking for is to have a commitment from the industry that the social rights, independently of how you work with a worker, should be fairly similar, and they should have the same coverage, especially when they're dependent on the platform, as I would say their primary income, maybe not their whole income, or definitely when their whole income is coming from that.
So that's great, but I'm interested in this idea because clearly the world has changed quite a lot compared to even 10, 20 years ago, right? Where you've got a whole load of people who want a lot more flexibility in their working schedules. So you're making this distinction between people who kind of depend on working for you and other platforms versus those who perhaps don't, and this is additional income. Where do you draw the line between those two groups, and how can you create a regulatory environment that kind of brings those two together in a fair way?
Good question. I'm not a regulator. What we should see this as an opportunity and not trying to fix a problem. You're absolutely right. I think there's a change in the way we all work, the way our children are studying. They're multitasking now. We're often, doing multiple jobs at the same time, multiple activities. So I think society has moved that, I'm not to judge if that's good or bad, but it's happening, and it's not going to change. So we need to confront the future of work in a very similar way. and let's look at taking all the advantages of flexibility, and let's give them the piece that's missing, right? Which is social benefits and guarantees and things like that. And I think there's a way of doing it. I'm not the right person to say how it should be done, but one thing shouldn't take away from the other.
Yeah, understood. Well, and I think it's really difficult. I think it's quite an intractable problem to get that balance right. Yeah. And what about the as you mentioned, you're operating in a lot of different countries. Do you see big differences between some of those countries in terms of the policy? I'm not talking necessarily about the simple law, but I mean the way that things are moving, and the way that we've just talked about, that people are shifting in terms of the way they want flexibility with work. Do you see differences between different countries?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a totally different position, not only in society, but in government about this question. About, you have, I would say, a very radical opinion in Southern Europe about where this should go and how protection, and you have a more open stance, I think, in Eastern Europe, for example. They're looking to be anti-bureaucratic in a lot of ways. Also, the job per se is quite well perceived in society. They have a decent income, with comparable jobs. We often use the paradigm of a waiter versus, in pretty much all countries, you generally earn more than a waiter per hour. We're in Africa, totally different story. I mean, there's waiting lists to join the platform. Yeah, and obviously, in a lot of countries as well, we're turning what we'd call a submerged market, where people are paid in cash as couriers, to regulated, where they're a platform, where they're official workers, where they get social security. So this depends on the place you are. Yeah. We used to operate in Latin America, very similar to that. Couriers or messengers, or they were generally, working a black market as such. Yeah. They paid cash at the end of the day or at the end of the week, and we've changing that. And I personally have sat down with politicians who've really seen that as positive, of how we're changing that and actually giving these people coverage and guarantees.
Yeah. So talking about that and the fact that you're talking to politicians, I mean, how is this debate going, do you feel? I mean, if you read the media, I think there seems to be quite a lot of kind of extreme views, let's say, a lot of this idea that there's a dystopian future waiting for us and companies like you are creating a whole set of autonomons that are controlled by robots and so on. What are you doing about that? And I mean, how do you think policy will develop? Is it healthy to have that kind of debate going on? And are you kind of engaging in those kinds of topics in the media, or are you kind of basically staying fairly silent and letting the debate go on?
I mean, first of all, this is being debated as we speak in Brussels. I mean, this is one of the big topics right now. We're part of the conversation, both from an industry perspective as well as an individual from Glovo. So we're in the conversation. We have to be. I think regulators generally regulate better the better they're informed from every angle. Yeah. So my job is to say how our platform works, how the riders earn. We do surveys regularly with rider, basically their happiness, what they're asking for, what are their pain points. That's key to a regulator to regulate well. So we're in the conversations both at national level and Brussels. And the other question is, are we active? We've been fairly outspoken, I think, on gig economy and what we think. I've spoken about that, and this conversation today is about that. That we think, just because we believe that flexibility, freelance model, part-time, full-time, you can connect when you want, disconnect, and it can fit in with whatever else is happening in your lifestyle, doesn't necessarily and shouldn't necessarily mean that they can't have certain guarantees. A trademark for Europe as a reference would be Italy. They regulated, and the industry and the different platforms are working with the trade unions. They're signing collective bargaining agreements with guaranteed these rights I'm talking about, and yet they maintain the freelance and that dynamic aspect that they can, they can have that flexibility that they're looking for, and not fixed hours, fixed timetables, etc., which doesn't fit into a lot of people's lifestyle. That to me makes a lot of sense. In the Nordic regions as well, which we don't operate, but there's collective bargaining agreements now which allow the worker to decide. So he can decide if he wants full employment with a series of more rigid structure and framework, or he can decide for freelance, where he's got more flexibility. That's also very interesting. So I think those are examples of where just because you're flexible and you allow that doesn't take away workers' rights. Yeah. And that is where we stand.
And does it, I mean, to take that a bit further, I mean, how fundamental is this to your business model? And it sounds like you're already operating in a number of different structures where you've got employees on the one side, you've got freelancers on the other. You know, how, going forwards in terms of the business model for Glovo, is it essential, or is this just something that needs to be worked out and you can work with either?
Well, we're working with three types today. You know, it also depends on the operation. So, for example, in Eastern Europe, where there's a lot of countries that work with the third-party operators who manage the logistics for you, they still have an individual relationship with the courier. They still have our app, but that's how it works. I mean, it works very well, similar to the freelance. We also now have employees, which generally are more directed. They normally go to the same place all the time. Yeah. They don't, and it also works. So we also need the flexibility to operate and to grow, because at the end of the day, the more we grow, the more work we can offer, the more employment we can create, different types of employment. So there needs to be that consideration as well to allow not just ourselves, but there's a lot of other platform type work around which is depending on freelance workers. I mean, you know, in Spain, I mean, the main telecos, most of the framework of the people installing our ADSLs or fiber optics across the country are freelancers. Yeah. So that in a sense is platform work as well. Exactly.
Yeah. In many ways, I think you're just kind of turning into a structure that already exists.
Well, I mean, Spain's reference because it's our headquarters, but you know, there's estimated there's over 500,000 platform workers working today in different industries. Yeah. In our industry, it's tiny. I mean, it's like 30 to 35,000 actives per month. So just see the size of.
No, it's interesting, and actually, but in the end, you bear the brunt of a lot of this kind of negative media.
We're very visual. We're very visual. Well, they see our yellow boxes in the street, and it's an easy one to call out. Yeah. But it's much bigger than that, much bigger.
Bit related, obviously, to workers and workers' rights. This idea, again, of the dystopian future with the algorithm, and this idea that in some way, and particularly in Spain, we've got this, obviously, where there's this idea that a regulator of some sort can look at the algorithm and make sure that there's no, you know, we don't have any discrimination going on, that you're, you know, being fair to everyone, there's no racism within the algorithm and so on. How is that going to work for you going forwards, do you think? And is it practicable for outside regulators to kind of monitor the algorithm that you're using?
I definitely think this is a key question. I think algorithms as such need to make sure that they're abiding by certain criteria, ethics criteria, etc., which you mentioned. So I definitely think that needs to. I think the best way of fronting it is being transparent. Platforms like ourselves working with the regulators, helping them regulate algorithms. I think there will be a regulation for algorithms. I don't think it's because the companies are necessarily doing bad, but you have to do regulation because not, you know, some might take advantage of situations like you mentioned. So I think regulation will happen. What we need to be is part of that now. And I think, and in our case, what we intend to do is be very transparent on how our different algorithms work. Share that with regulators, make them understand why. Often a company would maybe have an algorithm, they don't think it's doing something wrong. Yeah. And you get an expert in who actually says, no, but actually this, a lot of these companies, and not so much in our sector now, which is becoming quite big. Food delivery is sort of in the second phase. They're not just a bunch of startups, they're big companies now. But there's a lot of platforms that's beginning now, and they're moving at lightning speed, and they're not looking at all the things. They don't have the resources, they don't have the capital. So they're moving ahead at a lightning speed, and they're obviously maybe make some mistakes there. So I think it's going to be dealt with. I'm very hopeful that it'll be dealt with in the correct manner, which is logical, which is, you know, a series of rules that you should abide by, without going into your intellectual property, which is obviously, you know, very important for these companies who build.
Well, of course, and keeping them confidential, right? You mentioned the food delivery is kind of going into a second phase. Quite interesting. I mean, some of these companies really are very big now. Second phase businesses then often become really big and then face things like competition law issues. Are you seeing that as an issue coming up? You know, most markets now seem to be dominated by 2 or 3 players, and this seems to be consolidating in a lot of markets. You know, you've dominated in certainly in a number of the markets that you're in. and you've probably, arguably pulled out of markets where you don't feel you can dominate. So is this going to be an issue going forwards? This idea that competition between a small number of players is going to cause governments to step in and start, regulating and restricting?
Yeah, I don't like the word dominate. I don't think we've ever dominated any market. First of all, we're often the smaller player, certainly capital-wise. Yeah. It's true we're leading in most of our markets. Of the 24, I think we're leading in 20. But we've done that with a lot less capital than our competitors, so dominate is certainly not the right word.
No.
I think it's just being more agile, and it's evolving. So right now there's food as the core, restaurant food. You see this huge growth now in groceries. Yeah. I think there's going to be a number of different companies doing different things in the same space and with their unique value. I personally can't see a market with more than 3-4 platforms actively working and being profitable, making sustainable businesses. So there will be a limitation. And then there'll be others around which will be specialized in other things like groceries. There'll probably be retail specialists. We're multi-category. We have been from day one, so we do all that stuff. So hopefully we'll be well positioned. But a good example, we might lead in food and maybe be second in groceries. Or lead in electronics and be second in pharmacy. I don't know. So I think it's gonna evolve. I think on demand in many aspects is here to stay. And this is one example. There's always going to be room for 2 or 3 players, I think. So if there's one dominant leader, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is happening a little bit in Germany, where there was one food operator alone, almost in the market, and now 2 or 3 have come to the market again. Delivery Hero has just gone back to its home market where they left, and they're going to compete. So they obviously think there's room for them to take market share, or otherwise they wouldn't do it. So just to answer your question, I don't think there'll be complete domination by one player, and I think there's going to be room for 2 or 3.
Okay, well, look, you touched on this already, but let's talk about some of the other sectors, and perhaps they're more phase 1 than phase 2 in terms of delivery. So, so on-demand services like grocery delivery, like pharmacy delivery. What are some of the other issues from a regulatory perspective that you're starting to look at in those categories? What do you think is going to affect the development of these new sectors?
So we're starting to build our own micro-fulfillment centers. Actually, we have been for a couple of years. We've got nearly 100 built worldwide. These are storage units within the city that distribute very near to the consumer. So we can deliver, groceries, normally convenience, literally in 10, 15, 20 minutes. And we have competitors as well moving into that space. And what's happened, which is logical, is you have these supermarkets, not open to the public, but all the same, they're supermarkets, which suddenly have a lot of couriers in front, either waiting, delivering, and it creates a lot of noise. And sometimes these are neighborhoods, where neighbors, suddenly there's a disruption in what was there before. There's noise, there's activity, and they don't. So I think that's one thing that needs to be addressed. These need to be built, with good codes of conduct to make sure that they create a little negative impact to the environment around them.
So it's planning issues, really.
Planning issues, but also, they're open 24/7.
Right.
So,
problems. Yeah.
So you've got to think about those sort of things. And I think that's the type of thing that we're working with local councils to make sure that, we're doing things in the right way. And I'm sure our competitors are probably doing exactly the same thing. I'd hope so. Yeah. So that's around groceries. I think pharmacies are very interesting. It's hyper-regulated, health, obviously, as it should be. And we have different regulations in different countries. So, a good example is in some countries we're not allowed to deliver medicine, in some we are. Some countries we're not allowed to prescribe medicine. So we've got different issues and that'll be very complex. I think short term for us to change that. We don't decide on that in health regulation, pharmacy regulation. I think also we need to be seen as an ally of pharmacy. There's a worry from the pharmacy industry that we become a competitor, when in fact our whole business model is the complete opposite. We go to pharmacies and we actually help them sell more or sell for a new channel, which is digital. So we need to be seen as an ally for some industries where sometimes they think, these...
Well, and you're already doing that in a number of other sectors. Well, you've partnered up with a few kind of high street retail stores to deliver their products. So how is that going? Is that going to be the future, do you think? More and more of that kind of activity?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. We have a department which is called Q-Commerce, Q for quick. And I think that's going to be one of the fastest growing segments of e-commerce. I think what it used to be fine 48 hours, now it's more or less okay 24, but people are asking same day. It's going to be 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a really important part. And who is very close to the consumer? The retail stores. The big e-commerce companies have spent years moving products away from the cities to these storage places thousands of miles away from the customer, and then to ship them back. They realize that they need to be close to the consumer, so they're getting closer and closer. I mean, Amazon, they're buying retailers.
Yeah, of course.
They're building mass storage right on the edge of the cities now. They want to deliver same day, within 2 hours. So this is a tendency, and my argument is, guys, retailers, you're the closest to the consumer. You have a unique advantage. This window of opportunity, you're probably only going to have it a couple of years. So really take advantage of it. We're an ally. There's other companies who are allies as well. And we can help get that product to the consumer who for whatever reason can't leave home or can't leave and wants it. They have an opportunity to do that.
Good. Look, lots of other things to talk about. I suppose I just wanted to touch on environmental issues. What are the kind of environmental issues that are coming into this, and clearly, a big topic at the moment in general, but what are the kind of regulatory issues, the kind of concerns that people have about platform businesses in general and the environment?
I don't think there's regulatory issues that concern us. I think any movement from a sustainable angle is positive. Even if we have to adapt to it, I think that's positive. I mean, the planet comes ahead of everything. We're actually committed to be carbon neutral by the end of this year, so that's in a couple of months. All our deliveries already carbon neutral, so we've reduced obviously carbon offsets, but also we compensate anything we can't reduce. Also, I think from an environmental aspect, obviously we're already per se, I think, having a positive impact. A large percentage of our deliveries are done on bicycles. More and more electronic motorcycles or bicycles as well. So we're already having, I think, a positive impact. Worldwide, 30% of shopping trips are still done in cars. But obviously we need to move that quicker, no? So we need to move, the motorbikes that are non-electronic to electronic. We need to do at least amount of deliveries possible in cars, or if they are in cars, they'll be. So we're part of that, like any other company, and we're very focused on that. It's very different depending on the geographies you are, the speed you can do that.
And size of the city and so on.
Yeah. And then one we're particularly concerned about, and I think we have to raise our hand, is single-use packaging. I think that's one thing that you could say that platforms like ourselves not only are not helping reducing that, we're increasing it. The more I grow, the more single-use bag. So we're conscious of working with our partners. In the end, the packaging that we deliver with is not our own. It's through our restaurants or the stores decide that. So we actually be working with our partners to reduce that, or at least have sustainable packaging, single use, and we obviously work with them. We've built our own store that actually supplies sustainable packaging to our partners to incentivize them to actually change from plastic, for example, to better. That's a responsibility of the company that we should be going in that direction. It's a big initiative for us, and we see that as very important.
So Sacha, just a final question. If we were to sit down in this lovely room in a year's time, what do you think will have changed from a very sort of regulatory policy perspective? What will have changed in a year's time?
I think a couple of things. I think Portugal would have regulated the industry because they're in the process right now, and I assume that's going to happen well before the end of the year. And I think Brussels will definitely have a stronger position on actually how they see this working out. I don't think it'll be done in a year, but it'll certainly be the framework of where they're positioning Europe on this theme. So looking forward to that. I think the more clarity there is, the better for everyone.
Right. Thanks very much. That was really interesting, and I'll see you here in a year's time.
Thanks a lot.